I think we're ready to move on to the
Okay.
next one, which is a locked-in person called Isabelle Lauberthe, who lives in Paris in France. She's 51 years old. She was born in Paris and has always lived there, despite a few moves related to the evolution of her own personal life. Isabelle hadn't anticipated what would happen to her in her 35th year. The arrival of locked-in syndrome was a radical change from the life that she had imagined. This is what she's going to try to explain to you, even though words can never truly describe the intensity of the upheaval that she's been through. Thank you, Barker.
Vous êtes bien au 06 64 83 50 63. Comme je ne suis pas disponible pour l'instant, eh bien laissez-moi un message. Merci beaucoup, au revoir.
Hello, you just heard the voice from me for. My name is Isabelle. Here's my story.
On October 31st, 2008, I woke up feeling very tired, but it was hardly surprising. I had partied a little too hard the night before. One of my friends had passed her nursing exam, and we had been celebrating all night long in the streets of Paris. As a Parisian, my life was completely in tune with the effervescence of the city. Coming from a family with loving, caring parents and a very boisterous older brother, I grew up happy and carefree. After earning a degree in medicine and social work, I decided to study psychology at university, where I wanted to become a child psychiatrist. As things turned out, I became an administrative director of an ophthalmologic practice in the center of Paris. I led an extremely active life with a fascinating job, a happy and fulfilling relationship, and lots of outings with my friends. And then came that fateful day of October 31st, 2008. I had taken the day off. My partner and I had all sorts of commitments planned. It was a very full day, somewhat clouded by an intense fatigue and an unusual lasting weariness. In the evening, the tiredness became associated with a very severe headache and tingling in my entire left arm. My partner called the emergency medical service. I spoke to the doctor who told me to go to the hospital. Overwhelmed by the exhaustion, the headache and the tingling, I decided to go back to bed, saying, "We'll see tomorrow," convinced that nothing could happen to me at 35 years old and in perfect health. It was a terrible night. Early in the morning, I sat down on the bed to go to the toilet and rolled over onto my left side. I couldn't sit up again. My partner suddenly realized the seriousness of the situation. He sent for a doctor who immediately had me hospitalized. It was November 1st, a public holiday in France. I spent the entire day in an examination room watching a parade of doctors who repeatedly performed the same test on me over and over again. From time to time, my partner managed to come and see me and say a few reassuring words. At around 7 p.m., I was asked if I agreed to undergo a MRI. We were trying to have a child, so it would be dangerous if I were pregnant. I immediately agreed. I caught a glimpse of my mother, who would tell me years later that I kept asking the time and that my mouth was twisted. After the MRI, I underwent a series of lumbar punctures and other tests. It was late. We were in the corridor waiting to be transferred to another hospital. I was lying on a stretcher, stroking my partner's hair. All of a sudden, he burst into tears, burying his face in my stomach. It was at that moment that I realized what was happening was serious. I was taken to another hospital. I saw a whole bunch of caregivers rushing towards me. They used incomprehensible terms and handled me from all sides. Suddenly, I felt an intense pain in my throat. This would be my last memory of November 1st, 2008. I woke up not knowing exactly how much time had passed. According to my parents, it had been a day. I felt as if I were in a semi-reality. I oscillated between moments of lucidity and hallucinations. Sometimes I thought I was in a hospital in the United States or in a laboratory in Germany. I saw people around me. I tried to call out to them, but no sound came out of my mouth. I saw I had tubes everywhere, but one was particularly unpleasant and irritating. It was the one at the back of my throat, the one that allowed me to breathe. My partner and my parents were omnipresent. I had so many unanswered questions. I saw people bustling all around me. Some talked to me, others didn't even see me. I had no bearings. I didn't know where I was, what was happening to me. I had the feeling I was losing myself. I spent countless hours, probably days, going over the same questions. But when I addressed people, they never answered me. I could see that I could no longer speak, no longer move, but it immediately plunged me into a deep torpor, and my analytical mind was completely disoriented. The daily visits of my partner and parents were my only comfort and reference point. One day, a very kind doctor approached me and explained that a board with the letters of the alphabet would be put in place so I could communicate with the outside world. My partner had noticed that I was trying to express myself through my gas and had mentioned it to the care team. When the doctor suggests this board, an incredible feeling of happiness watched over me from head to toe. The alphabet was arranged according to the most frequently used letters. With a blink of an eye, I would validate the desired line. Then, at the announcement of the desired letter, I would blink again. It would be long and tedious, but this board would become my salvation. Often, throughout the day, blinking became difficult and my concentration was hard to maintain. This earned me a number of arguments with my partner. One night, I was lying askew and my back was hurting terribly. Having no way to alert the caregivers, I realized that if I cried, it would cause a pulmonary congestion and the saturometer alarm would go off, forcing a nurse to come in. So I started crying for many reasons. The alarm went off as expected and a nurse entered. I signaled to her with my eyes to take my board so I could spell out back. She looked at my board and said, "Oh, you think? I don't understand it." She left, turning off the light and closing the door. At that moment, my physical pain was coupled with indescribable psychological suffering. That night was one of the worst of my life. Gradually, they tried to sit me up in a large, comfortable wheelchair, strapped in with sheets to prevent me from falling forward. The first few times weren't very successful, as after a few minutes I had to be laid back down due to severe dizziness. I was able to stop using the ventilator and instead had a tracheostomy. I also had a nasal feeding tube for nutrition, hydration, and medication. But this was later replaced with a tube directly into my stomach. At that time, it was unimaginable to consider continuing my life. Unfortunately, I had no way of stopping this new life that was being imposed on me. I did try asking my partner for help, but he flatly refused. In hindsight, I agree with this decision. One day, my parents were allowed to take me for a walk around the hospital grounds in my big, comfy VIP chair. They wanted to take me to the cafeteria downstairs. The elevator arrived and they pushed my wheelchair inside. Facing the mirror, I saw a bloated woman with a hole in her throat, disturbed hair, and a lifeless body. I screamed internally. The shock was so overwhelming that I couldn't even spell the word mirror on my board. My parents and the people around me wondered why I was in such a desperate state. It took me several minutes to explain to my parents. I hadn't seen myself in months, and the shock was terrible. Following this incident, the speech therapist had me work in front of a mirror every day. Speech therapy was particularly difficult as I couldn't do any of the exercises. Opening my mouth, sticking out my tongue, nothing was possible. I enjoyed physical therapy more, although it was only passive mobilization. One evening, I asked my partner to give me a pen to write because I was tired of spinning everything out. He said no, it wasn't possible. I repeated my request, unfolding it with irritated blinks, but he refused again. He then got up and left the room without a word, leaving me annoyed and puzzled. 2 minutes later, I saw him return accompanied by a doctor. At that moment, I cursed him, thinking he had gone to complain about me. The woman came up to me and asked if I wanted a pen to write with. I closed my eyes in agreement, and she replied very gently, "But miss, it's not possible. You can't move anymore." At those words, my eyes fell on my hands, which remained completely still despite all my efforts to move them. The inner pain I felt was indescribable. It was as if a bomb had exploded inside me. Even 15 years later, I can still feel fragments of that harsh reality. I don't know why I still hadn't realized that I was completely paralyzed. Perhaps it was a bit of denial that made me believe some possibilities still existed. My boss would regularly visit me, but on that day, for the first time, I refused to see him. It was too devastated. I spent 6 months in intensive care, 6 months constantly hooked up to machines, 6 months being fed and hydrated through a tube. It took them a long time to make a diagnosis. After weeks of tests, the results finally came in. A foodborne bacterium, listeriosis, had nestled itself invisibly in my brainstem and then became its agent. it was after 6 weeks that it dealt the final blow. The night of October 31st was my official encounter with listeria. The damage caused during the incubation period is dramatic and irreversible. This bacterium can be found in uncooked foods or raw milk cheese. For there to be consequences, a large quantity of the food must be ingested. I therefore had to recall the so-called sensitive foods I had eaten 6 weeks prior. After many hours of reflection and mental anguish, I remember a cheese I had eaten in large quantities during my vacation in the south of France. I will never know for sure if this cheese was 100% responsible for my collapse, but I have strong suspicions and a real gut feeling about it. One day, I was told I would have to go to a hospital with a rehabilitation center. This was to be my new home for the next 18 months. On the second day, the nurses wheeled a stretcher into my room and told me, "Go to the shower." It had been 6 months since I had only had bed bath. Suddenly, I was terrified of the idea of having a jet of water on my body. In the ward, there were quite intensive rehabilitation with, every day, psychotherapy, orthopedics, occupational therapy, and psychomotor therapy. The only small problem was my physiotherapist was visually impaired and I was almost mute. In terms of understanding, we sometimes ran into our own limits. However, it was able to work intensively and regain some movement like grasping with my right hand or standing upright with a support in front of me. An hyperextension of the knees, recurvatum, allows me to stand. My knees lock once I am standing. Walking would be impossible, but being able to stand upright is very useful as it has many benefits. Walking is no longer a priority. The essential thing is to be able to function in the most effective way possible. I met a fantastic occupational therapist who taught me to adapt using the aids available to me. She made me a unicorn to help me read. It's a plastic rod with a non-slip piece at the end that is to be attached around the forehead to turn the pages of a book, using the mobility of the head. It takes a lot of patience and determination to achieve this. Over the years, I regained some mobility in my right hand and I can now read normally, although turning the pages is still tedious. And then there was a speech therapist. I think it was the first beautiful and great encounter of my new life. This man, through his passion, professionalism, and humanism, taught me every day to eat again and to express myself. A spoonful of compote of puree could take 40 minutes to swallow. With his patience and my determination, we repeated this learning process on a daily basis for months. Little by little, it became 2 spoons, then 3. When I talk about it today, I wonder how I managed to keep going through this ordeal over and over again. I think I became a performer. My life was a ring and I was becoming a fighter. Every small progress became a great victory. Every noon, I could smell the milk trays, which was extremely painful, but at the same time, it was a motivation to succeed. For a very long time, I continued with my daily spoonfuls. After about a year, my tracheotomy was removed. The removal of this cannula in my throat was a real joy and pride. I could start eating peros by mouth again. But my diet was exclusively porridge. It was only after 5 years that my diet became almost normal. But to this day, I still avoid certain foods considered difficult, rib-eye steaks, for instance. I was also able to drink again, but in the form of gelled water for many years. I eventually returned to liquids, sparkling water exclusively, although I am still prone to a few persistent but controlled mishaps. As far as speaking was concerned, I could express myself through sounds and then words by associating them with movement of my eyelids to agree or disagree. Little by little, the wonderful occupational therapist found ways to try to make me move my right arm. All sensitivity in my left side had disappeared. For the record, I was left-handed. As a result, I had to learn everything on my right side. From wheelchair to wheelchair, I learned to drive an electric one, which was a giant leap towards independence. It was a real freedom that I quickly got used to. I stayed there for a year and a half. I knew everyone. People appreciate me for who I had become. My room had become my den. The walls were covered with photos, maps, and drawings. I had an extra clothes rack added. Every noon, my parents would come and bring me coffee that we would thicken with powder. My partner also came every day. Over the months, the visits became more diverse. Colleagues, friends, family. Each first time was a profound upheaval. From time to time, I was allowed to go out on Sundays. It was on a transport voucher intended for the paramedics that I first saw the word locked-in syndrome. Having read Mr. Bowlby's book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, I immediately knew what they referred to. But one day, a big meeting took place with all the therapists and my family and partner to announce that I had to go home. A feeling of apprehension coupled with a fear of the unknown immediately came over me. I was going to have to face this new life stuck in a wheelchair and 100% dependent. During this meeting, they mentioned the need to have home care assistants. I knew nothing about their role and their immeasurable presence. The occupational therapist came to her new home to recommend some adaptations. She suggested we replaced our bed with a medical one. I firmly refused, as it would have a negative impact on the relationship with my partner. However, after the first night in our apartment, I requested a double medical bed because I couldn't physically sleep on our old one anymore. Life as a couple has changed drastically. My partner juggled the shortcomings of the home care agency, my difficulty accepting my new situation, and the challenges inherent in disability. As the years went by, our life together became increasingly unimaginable. I think for a long time he believed he could save me with his love, but unfortunately his efforts were in vain. Everything became unbearable for him. In 2012, he decided to leave. His decision was very difficult to accept, but I will never allow myself to judge him for it. For me, living with illness is an obligation. For him, it was a choice. Unable to support myself financially, I moved to Paris and ended up settling near my parents. My partner's departure forced me to become more independent in terms of organization and administration. I had to take charge of my new life. My days, months, and years evolved through my encounters. I rediscovered ordinary things that became extraordinary. One of the most striking examples is my first swim in the sea. 6 years after my body stopped functioning, it was during my first vacation in a rehabilitation center. There is a special kind of floating loungers called Tyralos. The first time I was laid on them, I felt an incredible mix of fear, joy, stress, and happiness coming over me. It was a real tsunami that overturned my heart. The wheelchair that was blocking me from now on is also allowing me to experience moments that would have been unthinkable in my new situation. It made me run in the streets, stadiums, or forests. It has taken me to Mexico, Tunisia, the Dominican Republic, and Marrakesh. Over the years, I've made some wonderful encounters and I've savored every moment of happiness to the full. I don't know if I've really accepted my disability, but one thing's for sure, I've learned to live with it. It took me 11 years to take a tramway and 14 years for a bus. No matter how long it took, I managed. Today, I use a train, bus, and streetcar. Today, my daily life is very different. Getting up became very technical and my preparation extremely long and tedious. I can now eat on my own, but I have to be careful about the foods I choose. Every day, I go to the physiotherapist who makes me walk and work on my sitting balance. Each season ends with a sequence of sit-ups, which is extremely tiring, but so invigorating. I see my speech therapist several times a week, with whom I work on my articulation and voice. I do a lot of breathing exercises to optimize the abilities I've been able to recover. I no longer expect to make any significant progress, but rehabilitation has become essential for my physical and moral well-being. I'm involved with the APF France Handicap Association, which defends and campaigns for the rights of disabled people. I'm also very close to the ALIS Association. I thrive on projects and challenges. They are the driving forces of my life. The obstacles are many, the shortcomings enormous, but every day I learn a little more that I must no longer look back and wonder why, but look forward and say why not. I loved my first life to bits, but I much prefer the person I've become. Every day, in a struggle to exist, but out of the daily struggle emerges a respect and love of life that I now have the incredible good fortune to be able to pursue.
Thank you so much, Isabelle. What an absolutely marvelous presentation. I'm not sure whether you're still with us, but thank you again very much if you are. I noticed on the board that your friends and care team had put up that you have showed patience and perseverance. But even more than that, you show incredible optimism and just a faith in a trust in the people around you to be able to help you, and the huge amount of work that you've put in to get yourself so much better and have so many more abilities. It's deeply impressive. Thank you so much, Isabelle. If anyone wants to read more about Isabelle, she's written a chapter for our book. I'll post the title of the book later on today. It's called Giving a Voice to Those Living Locked In, and it's available from your bookshop. But Isabelle and several of the other people today have written chapters, contributed chapters to that book. A life very, very worthwhile following and appreciating. Thank you very much, Isabelle.